We continue now at the top of Daf Kufya Dalet Amud Aleph and Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 114a. On the previous summit, the Gemara brought the Mishnah which said, if you have animals that are disqualified as being offerings, for example, Roveya and Nirba, animals involved in bestiality, so there, if you slaughter those animals outside of the Beis HaMikdash, the person is exempt. And the reason is because it says in the pasuk lahakriv, it has to be something that is fit to be offered in the Beis HaMikdash. Since these animals are not fit to be offered in the Beis HaMikdash, therefore there is no liability. But the Gemara asked, why bring from the word in the pasuk lahakriv? Why not bring it from El Pesach or El Moed? That was the source for similar kinds of cases where we say that the person is exempt. Why bring a different pasuk over here? And the Gemara continues and says, Bishlama Roveya v'Nirba. Now I understand why we need this separate pasuk by the case of Roveya and Nirba. Again, that's animals involved in bestiality. Because Mashkachas Leid Akteshinu Meikara, the case that the Mishnah can be talking about is when he consecrated the animals from before, meaning before they were involved in the bestiality, before they were disqualified, and so therefore they were still fit to be El Pesach or El Moed, they were fit to be brought to the Pesach or El Moed. V'Hadar Ravu, and then they were involved in the bestiality, and so then the exclusion, the fact that the person is exempt, is coming from a different pasuk. It's coming from lahakriv. And Rashi explains, Bishlama Roveya v'Nirba mashkachas la, the itzrich lemutinu milahakriv, we need to exclude, in those cases, from the word lahakriv, we exclude the liability, dakdashinu v'hadar nirbu, because the case is that they were consecrated first, and then they were involved in the bestiality. V'kevan dechazu kvar v'idchu, so since they were fit to be karbanos, but then they were pushed off, because again, they were involved in the bestiality, ru'uyim karina bahu, they are called fit, sheniru kvar, because they were at one point in time, they were fit, velo mimti, so they're not excluded. Me'al Pesach, they're not excluded from the word El Pesach or El Moed. The equal remember, because one can say Hachi Amar Kra. The pasuk simply means as follows: Ve'El Pesach or El Moed lo heviu b'shenira lavo ve'achar kach shochtu b'chutz. El Pesach or El Moed means that at one point in time they were fit to come to the Pesach or El Moed, and then he slaughtered it outside the Beis HaMikdash. So chayiv, so the person is liable. Avol seir hamishtalech la'achar vidoy. But for example, let's say the case we had in the previous Amud, the seir hamishtalech, the he-goat on Yom Kippur that's sent to Azazel after Vidoy, so that already at that point in time, once the confession is made, so mimit me'al Pesach, so that is excluded from El Pesach or El Moed. Sharei zehevio keshenira lavo, because he actually already brought it to the Pesach or El Moed when it was fit. Umishayotzel achar Vidoy, when it goes out after the confession, so lo nira lavo, it's no longer fit to be brought El Pesach or El Moed, and so therefore that actually would be excluded. But again, Roveya and Nirba, we can have this case, this scenario where it was Akdashinu Meikara, it was consecrated first, and then it was involved in the bestiality, so it can't be excluded from El Pesach. Instead, it's excluded from Lahakriv. But the Gemara continues and asks, Ela Muksa v'Nevad, but what about the cases listed in the Mishnah of Muksa v'Nevad, where it's designated or worshipped as Avodah Zarah? So there you can't say that it was Akdashinu Meikara, because Ein Adam Oser Davar She'eno Shalo, a person is not able to make something forbidden that isn't his. Once it would be consecrated, once it's hektish, so worshipping it as Avodah Zarah is actually not going to make it forbidden, because the Isser cannot be Chal if it's not really his anymore. It already belongs to the Beis HaMikdash. And so therefore, how do we explain that case? Why do we need this separate pasuk of Lahakriv? Let it just be excluded from El Pesach or El Moed. It's something that's not fit to be brought to the El Moed. And the Gemara continues and answers, B'kachim kalim. We could be talking about an animal that was consecrated as kachim kalim, as the lesser kind, the kinds of karbanos of lesser holiness. V'aliba de Rabbi Yossi Haglili, and following Rabbi Yossi Haglili, Diamar kachim kalim mamun bailimhu. Rabbi Yossi Haglili says that kachim kalim is considered that it does belong to the owner, so it's not a davar she'eno shalo. And so therefore the case could be the same case. It could be aktashinu meikara. He consecrated it first, and then it became muksa or nevad, and that isser is able to be chal, because it is considered to be mammon bailim, according to Rabbi Yossi Haglili. Where do we find Rabbi Yossi Haglili? The Tanya, as we learned in the following brisa, Umala mal b'Hashem, it says in the pasuk, Umala mal b'Hashem, l'rabos kachim kalim shehein mamono. That comes to include kachim kalim, that is considered his mammon. It belongs to him. Divrei Rabbi Yossi Haglili. These are the words of Rabbi Yossi Haglili. And Rashi explains, Ela Muksa v'Nevad, but when it comes to the cases of Muksa and Nevad, Al Karchach Mekame Dakdashinu Havalahu Muksa v'Nevad. We have to say that it was before the animal was consecrated that it became Muksa or Nevad. It was designated for Avodah Zarah or worshipped as Avodah Zarah. De'ila Vasar Dakdashinu, because if it was after it was consecrated, Sulo Mitzri B'Haksavi Avodah, so then it's not going to become forbidden through that designation or worship. De'ino Adam Oser Davar She'eno Shalo, a person cannot cause something to be forbidden that's not his. And the Gemara then brought the Bryce that says, Umola mal ba'Hashem. Rashi says, V'kichesh ba'amiso devorim sheyesh b'em l'Hashem uli amiso. This is talking about when a person denies that he owes something, but it has to be ba'Hashem ula amiso. And l'rabos kachim kalim, that includes, since it says ba'Hashem, that even includes kachim kalim. Meaning, shahakofer b'hen, let's say somebody denies that he owes kachim kalim, v'nishban, he takes an oath, v'hoda, then he admits that the oath was false. So chayiv aleim asham gazelos, he has to bring what's called the asham gazelos, which is a type of carbon asham, shein mamun ba'ilim, because the point is, according to Rabbi Yossi HaGalili, it is considered that it belongs to the owner. To karina be v'kichesh ba'amiso, we can refer to it as v'kichesh ba'amiso. And therefore, the Gemara continues, Hilkach, therefore, roveya v'nirba, again, by the cases of roveya nirba, devar erva, that is something that involves erva, and therefore, again, it could be chal, even if it was aktashinu meikara, as we said, muksa v'nevad avodas kochavim, and muksa and nevad, that's avodah zara, bekachim kalim, that's talking about kachim kalim, again, as we said by kachim kalim, it's mamun bailim. And what about the other cases in the Mishnah? Esnan, in the case of esnan is, let's say the animal was used as a payment for a prostitute, umechir, that's when the animal was in exchange for a dog, and kilayim if it was born from kilayim, from diverse kinds, diverse species, and yotzei dofen, that's when it was born by cesarean section. Those cases, again, how do we explain that we use this pasuk of lahakriv? The reason for that is bevaldos kachim. There we're talking about offspring of kachim, and kasavar, the Tan of the Mishnah holds valde kachim, that when it comes to offspring of kachim, bahava yosan hein kedoshim, in their state they are consecrated. We'll see Rashi in a moment. Rashi explains devar erva, again in the cases of rovei and nirba, that's something that involves arayas, v'chayel afal hamakdashim, as we said, that can take effect even if it was already consecrated. Kvar, even if it was already consecrated. Hilkach, therefore, mimati b'chutz milahakriv karban, we exclude the case of being offered outside the Beis HaMikdash from lahakriv, as we said, the lav b'nei hakravaninu, because now you're not allowed to offer them anymore. It has to be b'nei hakrava for there to be liability b'chutz. Dechsiv, as it's written, ki moshchasam bohem v'chol mokom shenemer hashchasa. Anytime it says the word hashchasa, einu ela dvar erva v'avodas kochavim, that refers to arayas and to avodas kochavim. And again, we said that's talking about kachim kalim, it's a davar, and therefore it's considered to be mamun bailim, and that's why the isser is able to be chal. And Rashi continues, nearly it appears to me, Dahachi Garsinan, the proper text of the Gemara is as follows, Esnan umechir v'kilayim v'yotzei dofen bevaldos kachim. All of those cases, we're talking about offspring of kachim. Kilomar, what it means to say is as follows, Hanoch detzrachnu lemutinu milahakrav karban, in those cases where we're excluding liability from lahakrav karban, v'lo nafki mi el pesach, and again, we don't learn that exclusion out from el pesach, al karchach b'sheniru kvar mayri, we have to say again that we're talking where it was fit at one point to be brought el pesach moed, and lo mashkachas, and that can only be found ela bevaldos kachim. The only scenario we can come up with is if we're talking about the offspring of a carbon, the offspring of kachim. V'ira lehupsul b'mei iman, and what happened is that the disqualification happened while the animals were in utero, while they were in the womb. Deniru lavo el pesach ol moed kodem shenasu esnan umechir. So in that case, they could have come to the entrance of the ol moed before the animal became esnan umechir. Imbo lahakriv es iman hayuhein boy el pesach, meaning if you were going to bring the mother animal, so then they could come along with the other animal. Di'ibedak deshinu, because if the case would be where he already consecrated the animal and then let's say it became esnan umechir, so lo mashkachas la, you wouldn't be able to come up with such a case. De'ein esnan umechir chal al mukdashin, because esnan umechir, those prohibitions are not going to take effect on something that's consecrated. Lefi she'ein and shalo, because again it doesn't belong to him. Umikran nafkalon b'tmura, and we learned that out from Psukim in Tmura. V'ibedahavu esnan v'hodrak deshinu. Now if it was esnan originally beforehand and then it was consecrated, mi'el pesach nafki, so you would learn it from the pasuk el pesach because it can't be brought to the entrance of the ol moed. V'chein kilayim v'yotzei dofen, and the same can be said for kilayim and yotzei dofen. Diak deshinu mishenoldu, because again if it was consecrated after it was born, mi'el pesach nafki, again then it would be learned out from el pesach. Ella, rather you have to say bevaldos kachim, we're talking about the offspring of kachim, to me'ikara im imon and niru lavo, because again with their mother they were able to come el pesach or el moed, and that's why they need to be excluded from lahakriv. Because Savar and the Tan of our Mishnah holds valdos kachim b'hava yosan hein kedoshim, when it comes to the offspring of kachim, it's in their state that they are holy. And Rashi explains, Bilei dasan miskadshos, what it means is that when they're born, that's when the holiness sets in. Hilgach, therefore, chal esnan u'mechir aleyen, the prohibitions of esnan and mechir can take effect on them. Im nasan la'uber shal mukdashin be'esnan, let's say, for example, by the case of esnan, where it's payment to a prostitute, let's say he's going to pay her the uber, let's say he'll pay her that offspring of mukdashin, de lo kaddish achanolet, so the actual kedusha doesn't take effect until the animal is actually born. And so again, for example, in this case of esnan, the esnan happens while the animal is in utero, and that's able to take effect because the hektish has not yet been chal, but it's still ro'i lavo pesach ol moed. Still, it's able to come to the entrance of the ol moed, agav iman, meaning through the mother animal, since the mother can be brought as a carbon, so the animal in utero can be brought as well, so therefore it's not going to be excluded from el pesach ol moed, but it will be excluded from lahakriv, because it's not able to be brought as a carbon, it cannot be offered, again, because it is an esnan, and the reason why the esnan is chal is because the kedusha is not chal until the animal is born. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Bale mumin oso v'espeno. The Mishnah gave three cases where Rabbi Shimon says that since eventually this animal is going to be fit to be brought as a carbon, therefore there is going to be a violation of a prohibition if the person offers the animal outside of the Beis HaMikdash. The three cases are by a temporary blemish that's eventually going to go away. By oso v'espeno, that's a case where, let's say, for example, the mother animal was already offered, was already killed today, and so now the offspring, it cannot be brought on the exact same day. You can't kill the mother animal and its offspring on the same day, and so therefore there also, once this day passes, the animal will be fit to be brought as an offering. And so therefore, again, if today it's brought outside the Beis HaMikdash, there's a violation of a prohibition according to Rabbi Shimon. And then the third case is the case of Torin, the case of doves. They're also, when they come of age, they will be ready to be offered in the Beis HaMikdash. And so therefore, again, in all of these cases, Rabbi Shimon argues against the Rabbanan, and Rabbi Shimon holds there is a violation of a prohibition. And the Gemara says it's necessary for the Mishnah to teach all three cases. The Itana Balei Mumin, if we only had the case of the animals with a blemish, Mishum de Mi'isi, those cases it's already disgusting to bring it to the Beis HaMikdash, Avol Torin, but let's say by doves, where they just have to get a little older, the Lo Mi'isi, that would not be considered disgusting. So Ema de Modu Leila Rabbi Shimon, one might say that over there it is considered fit enough, so to speak, to bring as an offering, to bring to the Pesach or Moed, and therefore the Rabbanan would admit to Rabbi Shimon in that case that there is a violation of a prohibition. And the Gemara continues, V'itana Torin, if the Mishnah only taught the case of Torin, of doves, Mishum de lo chazi v'idchu, that's because they were never fit, and they were pushed off in that manner. Aval Bali Mumin, but an animal that developed a temporary blemish, the Ichzu v'idchu, there it was fit to be brought as a carbon, and then it was pushed off. So Ema demo de lahu Rabbi Shimon l'Rabbanan, there, maybe Rabbi Shimon would admit to the Rabbanan that if it was fit and then pushed off, so there's not even going to be a violation of the prohibition. And V'itana hanitarti, if we only had those two cases, Mishum de psula de gufayu, those are intrinsic disqualifications in the animal. Aval oso v'espeno, when it comes to oso v'espeno, de psula me alma ka'asila, there the disqualification is coming from the outside, because again, it's, let's say, the mother animal. The fact that the mother animal was killed creates the prohibition on the offspring. It's coming from the outside. So Ema module Rabbanan l'Rabbi Shimon, some have the gears reversed over here. Ema module Rabbi Shimon l'Rabbanan, one might say that Rabbi Shimon admits to the Rabbanan, so it's richa, so it's necessary to teach all of the three cases that are in the Mishnah. And Rashi explains, Utsrichi hanoch tlos plugsa to Rabbi Shimon v'Rabbanan v'Masisim. We need all three cases of machlokus between Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanan. Mishum de mi'isi, again, the case of a blemish, it's disgusting to be brought as a carbon. But Odan b'mumin, while it still has the blemish, so Patri Rabbanan b'chutz, there the Rabbanan say exempt if it's brought outside. To lo meskablim b'fnim, that's totally not acceptable to be brought inside the Beis HaMikdash, it's disgusting. But Module, they would admit, the whole v'chazu lachar zman, but in a different case, they would admit that since it is fit after some time, koi belosase, so there is going to be a losase, there'll be a negative prohibition. The ichzu v'idchu ema, and then you have a case where it was fit and then pushed off. So then I could say that afagav the chiyavar mumon yirtzu, even though when the blemish passes it will be accepted, but hashtamiyah dechuyaninu, but now it's pushed off. V'niftar b'chutz, that's a reason to say exempt, again if it's brought outside of the Beis HaMikdash. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Shahaya Rabbi Shimon Omer, that Rabbi Shimon would say, and again, Rabbi Shimon would say that there is a violation of a prohibition in a situation where the animal will become fit to be brought as a carbon. And the Gemara says, my time with Rabbi Shimon, what's the reason of Rabbi Shimon, meaning what lo saseh are we talking about? And the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Law, Amar Reish Lakish. Rabbi Law says that Reish Lakish says, the Amar Kratz, because the pasuk says, Lo sasun kechol asher anachnu osim po hayom, don't do like we're doing today. And what does that pasuk mean? Amar lehu Moshe li Yisrael. Moshe says to Klal Yisrael, Ki ailisu la'aretz, when you enter Eretz Yisrael, yesharos takrivu, chovos lo takrivu, bring upright offerings and don't bring obligations. V'gilgul lagabe Shiloh, and this is talking about Gilgul, and when we have Gilgul in reference to Shiloh, mechusar zmanhu, that's exactly this case. It's a case where the time is we're still waiting for the proper time to be able to bring these karbonos. V'ka'amar lehu Moshe, and Moshe saying, lo sasun, don't do that, and that is the lo saseh, this pasuk of lo sasun. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbi Zeir, Rabbi Yirmiyah says to Rabbi Zeira, Yahachi, if so, and Rashi explains, Lo Sason, again, the pasuk says, Lo Sason Chen, Besifri Dorishle, the Sifri darshans this pasuk, Betchilas Bias Haaretz, in the beginning of when they entered the land, Hayomanu Metaltlin as HaMishkan, today we're moving the Mishkan, Vionu Asurin Bebama, and it's forbidden to bring karbonos on a bama, on a private altar, Vienonu Makriven Ela B'Mishkan, we only offer on the Mishkan. Lefikach Kala Karbonos Ksherim Lahakriv, therefore all karbonos are kosher to be offered. Mishanov but when we enter the land and have 14 years of conquering and distributing the land, anu mutarin bebama, so then it's mutter to use a private bama. V'sham lo sa'asim kechol asher anachnu osim po, and so there you shouldn't do everything we're doing here. Lahakriv chovos, you don't bring obligatory karbonos. Uma'anu mutarin, so what is mutter, meaning what can be brought on this bama? Ishkal hayasher be'enav, you can bring what's referred to as ishkal hayasher be'enav, meaning nidarim unadavos, you can bring voluntary offerings. She'enon chova olav, which is not an obligation. Ela sheyashu be'enav lesnadav, it's just something that the person saw fit to donate. Kilo bosam arota, because you still haven't come to the menucha and the nachala. Ad shetavo el hamenucha l'shilo, till you get to the menucha, which we said earlier is Shiloh. She'ava bisha nichnastem la'aretz ba'avrachem Yarden, meaning even though you entered the land when you crossed the Yarden, adayin lo bosam el hamenucha, but still you haven't come to the menucha, you haven't come to the place of rest, which is Shiloh. Ki ailisu la'aretz yudal et shonam shetichbashu v'tachliku. So what the Gemara means is, when you come into Eretz Yisrael, the 14 years of conquering and dividing the land, yesharos takrivu, you can bring yesharos. Nedarim unedavos hakrev bebamas tzibor. You can bring nedarim and nedavos, that you can bring bebamas tzibor on the communal bama, but chovos lo takrivu ish isha the individuals shouldn't bring an obligation even on the bama sibor, on the communal bama. Wait till you get to the menucha and then offer them. And what's the point? The point is, Alma, we see chovos de Gilgal, that the obligations of Gilgal mechusrei zman heim, they're still delayed ad kiyavo Shiloh, until there's an arrival at Shiloh. That's when those chovos will be brought. V'yakrivum sham, they should be brought over there. V'kamer Achman, and the pasuk is saying, Lo sasan osam bagilgal, don't do them in Gilgal. Umashma, and this is understood to mean bein bebamas sibor, bein bebamas yachid, whether on the communal bama or the individual's private bama, these cannot be brought. Alma mechusr zman bebama belosase, and so you see that if it's mechusr zman by a bama, that is a losase. It's considered to be a negative commandment. In other words, the pasuk is saying that you're not allowed to bring these obligatory karbonos. You cannot bring this on the bama. Otherwise, there's going to be this violation of the negative commandment, and that is the losase. Because again, you have to wait. It's mechusr zman. You have to wait ad ki yavo Shiloh. And the Gemara then said, "Hihachi, if so, dahanach de Gilgal mechusrei zman karisa lahu." If the karbonos of the time of Gilgal really are called mechusrei zman, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Kufya Dalid Amid Beis.